Dave, this show occurs as the WWF had decided to create what they called the brand extension. There was an original idea when they purchased WCW in 2001 to tour separately, to keep WCW alive as its own wrestling company and brand and have its own television show. In fact, take over Monday nights as a WCW show and have SmackDown on Thursdays remain as the WWF show. Of course, they dropped that idea in very short order, and come 2002, they've decided to split their crews as a Raw team and a SmackDown team. And WrestleMania 19 is the first time we see real evidence of that, or any evidence of that, really, on the grand stage. Talk a little bit about kind of the evolution of that idea and why it happened.
Vince thought that he was burning his talent out by putting him on 2 TV shows a week, and he just didn't think it was a wise idea. That was his thinking at the time. And there's still something to that. I mean, you notice that, like, John Cena rarely works SmackDown. Other guys do, but I mean, and other guys do work, the both shows, and some weeks Cena does as well. But there's, he just was afraid that I'm burning out all my feuds. So if we do this, we'll be able to keep it fresh. They just really didn't execute it well. I mean, there was the idea that they would foster real competition, and there was. The 2 writing teams were kept separate and competitive, but they didn't really want Raw to beat SmackDown to beat Raw. It was the weirdest thing in the world at the time. So, but yeah, that was the idea, and then they needed to have 2 champions again. After they had unified the title, they had to create a title, and the way they created that title was so bad. I mean, at least they could have done a tournament, right? Instead of just handing Triple H the belt, because it was just like, it's just like, at least give it some credibility.
Now, Dave, at WrestleMania 19, there was a one of the probably marquee matches was Hulk Hogan versus Vince McMahon, and in a street fight, I believe it was. And there is a spectacular shot, camera shot during the match of a bloodied Vince peering over the ring with this maniacal smile. Now, to the best of your knowledge, were moments like this planned, or was it just unbelievable luck and fate to get this moment?
I think that I don't really know how to answer that question, actually. Yeah. The match was planned, and I think, as far as like that shot with that thing, it's not out of character of Vince in that situation to be looking like that.
Sure.
So I would go with the idea that it was somewhat planned, but they're both improvisers too. So
right.
I really don't have a good answer for that one.
Okay.
Dave, wasn't the idea that this was supposed to really stoke the fire of Hogan and Vince as like this long story arc of these 2 guys both arguing that one made the other, and it was supposed to be this big interest point, and WrestleMania 19 just wasn't that big. It just didn't draw that much interest.
Yeah, it was not, because the show was really built around them, even though Angle and Lesnar went on last. And I believe that Angle and Lesnar going on last, in fact, I know this, there was something that happened, because that was a change in plans. They were not originally scheduled to go on last. It might have been Vince and Hogan going on last and changed that day. But no. And Austin and Rock were scheduled to go on last. Mm-hmm. And Austin, was hospitalized, and they didn't trust that he would be able to have the full blown-out match that they wanted. So then they went with Angle and Lesnar last and put Austin and Rock in the middle. That's what the story was. Okay. It's funny. You have Rock and Austin for the final time. You have Angle and Lesnar, who were the 2 studs of that period, and they really built the show around Vince and Hogan. The thing with Vince was, and if you look at the pay-per-views, Vince in a pay-per-view match, Vince himself, as part of storylines, was phenomenal for ratings, and inserted into a storyline was very good in pay-per-views. But Vince actually wrestling, the dynamic of Vince wrestling never did the big business. I remember when they did the first Austin-Vince match, and I believe it was the same month, maybe a week apart from a Hulk Hogan-Ric Flair match in a dying WCW. not a dying, but on the way down WCW.
February '99.
Yeah. So so it's 99. It's dying. Okay. So it's dying WCW, and I remember that the buy rates were almost identical, and I think that the Hogan Flair beat the Austin Vince, and I was thinking, how can this possibly be? They're killing him in ratings. This is the fresh feud. Hogan and Flair has been done a million times, and like Steve Austin against Vince McMahon, as far as with minions of Vince McMahon was great for business, but Vince McMahon himself wrestling, I think there was that dynamic that he was, as much as great a performer as he was, that they didn't see him as the guy, and I think they wanted it. I think the people didn't want it. I remember when do you remember when Vince did the interview? I remember this. This is the Bret Hart thing we go back to. Okay, Vince did the interview, and he just went, even though I'm older than Vince, the whole thing of I let him punch me deal, right? Mm-hmm. If it had been a real fight, I believe even though I'm, in my advanced age or however he said it, I think the outcome would have been different. And I remember everybody just, because they didn't want to hear that the TV announcer or the promoter or the 55-year-old guy could beat up the world champion. You just don't want, you don't want that part of the fantasy of wrestling gone. Mm-hmm. And I think it was the same thing. You really didn't want to believe that Vince McMahon could beat up Steve Austin in a one-on-one match, so it wasn't that big. And Hogan even more, because Hogan was the larger-than-life superstar of your childhood. And you didn't want the idea that the older TV announcer, who even had a better body than him at that time, which probably people didn't want to see either, could really beat him up, whether he could or not. It was a fantasy killer. You know what I mean? Kind of like... You don't, especially with Hogan, you just don't want that. I mean, it's like, but again, I'm going to throw a terrible analogy, but this one, the Bruiser was the biggest star probably ever in the modern era in St. Louis, and the Bruiser got old, and as long as Mushnick was around, the Bruiser might lose to Dick Murdoch, who was a tough guy, and beat him back. He might lose to Harley Race and beat him back. He might lose to Ric Flair in a world championship match. He wasn't unbeatable, but he was always strong. No matter how old and how washed up he was always strong. And then Geigel, who, when they came in, they had Scott Irwin as the Super Destroyer beat the Bruiser. And I just remember people in St. Louis and I didn't even get the Bruiser and saying, the Dick's old. Scott Irwin's, the Super Destroyer's a younger guy. Dick's done. And it's like, he's the legend. He can lose to the top guy, but losing a mid-card guy to in a mid-card match to a mid-card guy, lose to a non-top guy, no. And I think it's the same thing here. When Hogan in 2002 came in, it was okay for Hogan to lose to The Undertaker, or Triple H. I don't think that it was the right thing for Hulk Hogan to lose to everyone under the sun. I thought that was, you don't want that. Yeah, he can do it. Did it really put anybody over beating Hulk Hogan? No, not really. Because you don't want to see that. You want to protect the guy because he's your hero. Did people really like seeing Ric Flair losing everyone under the sun when he was old? No. And I think that the whole deal here is they didn't want Hulk Hogan in a competitive match with Vince McMahon to begin with. That's just not what they wanted, and it didn't do big business. And Hogan and Austin and Rock, had been done enough times before where it wasn't a big deal. And Angle and Lesnar, maybe just not strong enough, and look, it wasn't focused on that much, and even Austin and Rock wasn't focused on that much. They really built the whole show around Vince and Hogan. That was the main event, even though it didn't go on last. And I think that my feeling is, of course, that WrestleMania is the one aberration since 1998 with Mike Tyson, the one that didn't do that well. The other one that didn't do that well, if you remember, was Vince McMahon against Bret Hart. And, I think part of that was the UFC being the night before. But you have that common denominator, and as much as I like, Vince in certain stages and certain things, but Vince McMahon in a singles main event, I don't think, in a gimmick match as part of the thing, sure, but as a singles main event, I don't think that that's what people wanted from a singles main event.
Yeah. Now, there was the match between Triple H and Booker T for the World Heavyweight Championship at this show, and leading up to it, there was quite a pretty controversial storyline and feud leading up to it with Triple H being accused of saying some suggesting some racial slurs and undertones against Booker T, that it seemed like there was no way that Booker T wasn't leaving WrestleMania without the world title. Was there ever a plan to actually turn the belt over and give Booker T that win?
Absolutely. That was planned, and Triple H nixed the plan and just was, I don't think he's the right guy. I don't think he's complete enough or good enough or whatever, and he talked his way into keeping it. But absolutely, that when they were doing those angles, it was for Booker to get revenge at WrestleMania, and then, it was a double whammy. I remember watching it. I won't say I was upset, but I was upset for Booker T. Because I felt that, number one, he shouldn't have been put in that position unless he was going to win. And number two, if I remember the finish, didn't he do the pedigree and just wait forever before he pinned him? And I just thought it's like not only you're the heel, you're beating him clean with your move, but you're also letting, you know what I mean? Like taking more than your time. I just thought it was a double, triple whammy that none of which needed to be done. I wasn't necessarily in major disagreement with Triple H in the sense that I didn't ever see Booker T as as big a star as I saw Triple H. But the way they did that feud, I thought he absolutely had to win that match on that night.
You talked, Dave, about how the main event was Austin and Rock at a certain point, and due to concern about Austin's health, the match was pushed down a peg. It was rather short. Austin gets pinned clean by the Rock, and kind of disappears, rides off. It's his last match. We haven't seen him in action since.
He's never had a match since then.
So tell us about...
And he may never have another match. In fact, I would say that, I would never say never, but because he will never say never, but I think that the odds are great that will end up being the last match of his life.
Absolutely. So we see that moment for Stone Cold Steve Austin after seeing him ascend to such great heights through WrestleMania. So what was the injury? Why was it so severe and life-altering, really, for Steve Austin?
It's the neck just got worse and worse, and that was the deal. He was told, and when he came back, didn't he wrestle Bischoff and destroyed Bischoff in like a 5-minute match after a long period off?
That's true. Yeah, at 05.
Right, and then he came back to do the Mania match, and then they knew, and they kept this quiet, and that was Austin's doing. Austin did not want the word out that it was his last match, that it was a retirement match, so nobody knew. I was stunned. I found out that night after the match was over, several hours, where it was offhandedly mentioned to me, because I remember I wrote it in the Observer, and nobody knew it, and, until the Observer came out that week. But I remember, it's like that's Steve's last match. It was just in a thing. And it's like, what are you talking about? Steve's last match? It's like, yeah, that's his last match. He goes, since when? It's like, it's always been. He just didn't want anyone knowing. That he knew it was his last match. He was going to put Rock over because Rock put him over twice. So it was the fair thing to do and the right thing to do. And it was going to be this big climactic scene at the end of WrestleMania with the two of them. Still not telling people it was going to be the last match when it was over. He didn't want that. But that was how they were going to end the show. And then he got so high-strung and nervous and anxiety about it being his last match and being nervous about maybe not pulling off. I don't know what. And his neck was hurt, and he started drinking energy drinks, and he ended up in the hospital. And they didn't even, there was a real good chance, in the hospital that he wasn't even going to be able to wrestle on that show, which would have been a disaster. I mean, that's how much it was. And as I recalled the match, I thought the match was pretty darn good. It wasn't the best match of either man's career, but I thought it was a pretty darn good match.
Sounds like essentially a panic attack compounded with the pain in his neck.
I think there was a panic attack, yeah.
Yeah. Now, also coming into the show with significant injuries, such that he really shouldn't have been in the ring, but went through with it anyway, is Kurt Angle, who, of course, has made a career from winning a gold medal as a shoot with a neck broken, with a broken neck, clinically broken neck, to doing what he did here against Brock Lesnar. And it's a painful thing to watch if you know the kind of damage Kurt Angle had to his body coming in and still bumping the way he did against Brock Lesnar. Talk about taking that in that night, knowing what you knew about the shape he was in.
Oh my God. I have probably never been so I've never had the emotional feeling of watching a match than that match, because I knew I knew about Kurt. I mean, we thought there was a good chance this was the last match of his life, and we also knew, and it wasn't a secret. You know, it was not a secret that it could be the last match of his life. And I mean, the plan was about whatever it was, several weeks earlier, that he was going to drop the title on TV in like a 1-minute match and get out. He's done, right? He's dropping the title. And I remember being told ahead of time, you know, it's like Kurt's, you know, this is neck. He's done. He may never wrestle again. He's going to have surgery. If he comes back, it's going to be a long time down the road. Then he had that minimally invasive surgery, so he actually came back quicker than anyone expected. But the point is, you know, they thought he was going to have the major surgery, so it was going to be a year out no matter what, and perhaps the end of his career. Maybe very well the end of his career. So we all knew this, and he couldn't take any more damage anymore. So they were going to do it that week on SmackDown or Raw or whatever. I think it was SmackDown. I think it was a taped show. But whatever. It was one of those shows, and then he retained the title. And it's like, what the hell? And it's like, Kurt asked to do WrestleMania. He wanted to finish up at WrestleMania. And it's like, that's bullshit. I mean, that's my thought. It's like, how can Vince let him do that? It's like, well, he wanted to go. Well, Vince should never have let him do that. That's my, you know, it's like he, you know, the risk is too high. What if he gets paralyzed taking the wrong bump? Because that's what they said. You know, he's risking paralysis with any bump. So then I'm watching this, and this guy, you know, I'm thinking, okay, he's going to go in there and he's going to do about a 8-minute match, as careful as he can. Maybe he'll take one bump and then for the F5 at the finish, and you know, and just they'll stall their way through it, and Brock will win the title, and it's fine, and because we got it right. And I'm watching this, and this freaking Kurt Angle is out there wanting to have the match of the year. I mean, he's sitting there, you know. I mean, again, with the, you know, Brock's going to do the shooting star press because they wanted, and you know what? And if he'd hit that shooting star press, maybe it would have been the match of the year, because they had a freaking, you know, they had an incredible match, and Kurt's just taking bump after bump right on his neck, and it's just like, what the hell? But it's Kurt. That's I can tell you, that's Kurt Angle right there. That match is the epitome of Kurt Angle. He's and that's why he's in such the shape he's in now. That's why, but it's the same mentality. That's the guy who won the gold medal. You don't have that mentality, you don't win the gold medal. I mean, this obsessive behavior. I know it because I've seen it, whether, you know, in the top guys in other sports and everything. It's like you knock it and you say, oh, they're all messed up in the head, and why would you do it? But they, you know, if Kurt didn't have that gene in him, he would never won the gold medal. He would have been an average pro wrestler. That's what made him Kurt Angle, and you know, Vince let him do it. Whether I still think Vince shouldn't have let him do the match, but you know, whatever. He did, and Kurt was just going to go in there at WrestleMania, and he was going to have that incredible match with Brock. And you know, if Brock hadn't slipped on the shooting star, I think that they would, which was the finish. You know, the freaking 300-pound guy doing a shooting star press. It's absolutely ridiculous. I've seen Brock do it a couple times before, and he actually had an incredible shooting star press. He hadn't done it in a couple of years because when he got to the main roster, he was doing it in OVW. Not regularly. He did it once or twice. He did it on a WWE taping once, which was the most incredible move I've ever seen a big guy do in my life, because he did it 2/3 of the way across the ring, if you can imagine. This is Brock Lesnar in probably, it was early 2002 when he did this in a match in Louisville, Kentucky. That was a dark match before pay-per-view, and then somebody sent me somebody from OVW, I think, sent me the tape so I could actually believe what they were telling me, and I saw it from my own two eyes, and it was unbelievable. So you know, he had done it, but when he got to the main roster, I mean, that's the, you know, he had been told, don't come off the top ropes, don't do a freaking shooting star press, don't do a moonsault. You know what I mean? You're Brock Lesnar, you're a monster. So Kurt is in there, and it's like, it's WrestleMania, and I got it. You know, if you're going to do it once, it's going to be the time you win the world championship at WrestleMania from Kurt Angle in the match of the year, right?
Right.
We're going to go out and have the match of the year, and you're going to do the shooting star press. And it sounded like a great idea, you know. I mean, if you know, someone suggested it to me, I'd go, yeah, it's WrestleMania. If you're ever going to do it, this is the night to do it. And he slipped, and I watched him do that thing, and he slipped. And I mean, that's the two longest seconds of my life, or 10 seconds of my life. I will tell you the two of them. There's two different ones. And one is Fabricio Verdum against Fedor Emelianenko in San Jose with the triangle, and the other is Brock Lesnar with the shooting star press. It's like time stood still. I believe that shooting star press took 90 seconds, and I know it probably took 2 seconds. It was so slow. In my mind, when he slipped, I'm going, I'm just thinking, he's landing on his head and he's ending his career. And he landed right on his head. I'm going like, oh my God, he broke his neck. And, Kurt's already screwed himself up. Kurt's done.
Kurt's the one who's supposed to be risking paralysis here tonight, not Brock Lesnar.
Right. So I'm going, Kurt's taking all these bumps on this broken neck. I'm never seeing Kurt again. And Kurt was, one of my favorite wrestlers. And I go, I'm never seeing Kurt again. He just screwed up his life by this, right? And now I'm not going to ever see Brock again because he broke his neck and because he went straight down on his head. And luckily he had the big traps and everything, and he was only out for a couple weeks, and the neck didn't even break. But anyone else, man, or not almost anyone else, because again, you're talking about a 300-pound guy too, doing that, a 290-pound guy. So yeah, they both end up, it was that night where it's like Steve Austin, Kurt Angle, and Brock Lesnar. When it's over, it's like they're all gonna die. You know what I mean?
Walking wood.
I mean, it's like the end of all of them, because Steve was in the hospital and his heart was racing and he was like a madman. And Kurt was completely out of his mind, and Brock broke his neck, landed on that shooting star. And I thought, it's like this WrestleMania was a great WrestleMania, but my God, it's like the end of everybody's career. That's what I thought that night. It's like that, because I was told about Steve, and then it's like, and then they, when that was part of that conversation, it's like, like Brock, it's like Brock was like described me. He was a wounded animal. Like nobody could come near him, but they thought he broke his neck and that he may be done. And Kurt, they thought, was done, and Steve was done. So it was just like, my God, what a incredible show with the worst repercussions in history.
Of course, Brock just gets up after that horrific landing and still hits the F5 because you have to.
Well, yeah, I mean that was actually amazing in and of itself.
Yeah.
But when it was over, I mean, like I did ask, and it was just like, oh yeah, he collapsed backstage after.
Oof. So let's pause on this as far as WrestleMania 19, or close on this for this show, because we do try to mark along the way as we go through each WrestleMania the moments where different stars are designated the man, and this was sort of Brock Lesnar's platform for that. He had made a big splash, came into the WWE the night after WrestleMania 18 and crushed Jeff Hardy and was linked with Paul Heyman, ended up beating The Rock at SummerSlam 2002 for the championship, and here at WrestleMania 19, his first WrestleMania match, he beats Kurt Angle in the main event in an incredible bout. Your thoughts on what Brock Lesnar brought to the table as a youngster? I mean, he's 21 years old at this point, Dave, and as we know today, went on to be really one of the marquee stars in the business.
Well, let's see. This is 2003, so he was 25.
Oh, pardon me.
He was 25 on the day of this WrestleMania, but I think he was 24 when he won the championship, or
okay.
24. Yeah, it was, going in, it was like he'd already been champion, but this was going to be this was going to be the big one, and he is already being groomed to be the top guy. But
what attributes did he bring to the table? Why was he thought to be the guy?
The look, the athletic ability, I think the feeling that he was going to be the greatest working big man of all time. I don't know if he ever was, but I think the thought was like, look at him after only a couple of years, and where he's at, he's going to in time become. I just a freak athlete, and they all saw it in him.